SCTV foreign line, should the U.S. pressure Argentina, SECA 636, March 3rd, 1977.
There is talk in Washington about sanctions against Argentina in the event the counter-terrorist campaign is not handled with greater attention to human rights. The question arises as it has arisen in other situations. One thinks of the Jackson Amendment denying most favored nation status to the Soviet Union until it eases up its immigration laws, or the proposed sanction against the purchase of Rhodesian chrome, temporarily blocked by the Byrd Amendment. The question arises, what, if any, are the appropriate rhetorical, economic, diplomatic, or even military sanctions applicable by one nation against another? What better way to get into this question than to ask it of a former ambassador of Argentina to the United States, and of the ambassador to Argentina from the United States. Robert Hill, a graduate of the Taft School of Dartmouth and of the law school at New England College, has spent 4 years as a vice president of the W.R. Grace Company. Apart from that, he has spent his life in public service. A clerk on the Senate Committee for Banking and Currency, special assistant to the Undersecretary of State for Mutual Security Affairs, assistant secretary of State for Congressional Relations, Assistant Secretary for International Security Affairs in the Department of Defense, and along the way, Ambassador to Costa Rica, El Salvador, Mexico, Spain, and since 1974, Argentina. Mr. Eduardo Roca is a graduate of the School of Law and Social Sciences of the University of Buenos Aires. He has served as a member of the council of that law school and as a member of the faculty, and is also a trustee of the Catholic University of Argentina. He has been both ambassador to the Organization of American States and ambassador to the United States. I'd like to begin by asking Mr. Roca, what are the means by which Argentina has, in its history, expressed its displeasure short of war?
As the war as in general?
Yes, against any particular nation.
Well, I believe that there is no nation in the world with a tradition of peaceful tradition as Argentina. The last war that we had was against Paraguay in the last century, and so a sad memory came for that war against a brother, a nation which is very near to us, that really we manage ourselves to avoid conflicts. In my family, the brother of my grandfather was a president, Mr. Roca, General Roca, and perhaps the most proud thing that he did was to avoid a war with Chile, who was practically at the corner of our history.
Well, but I wanted to concentrate, Mr. Ambassador, on means short of war. We know that all countries have at one time or another, with the possible exception of Switzerland, gone to war in depending on the provocation. But what I'm interested in exploring is means short of war by which Argentina has expressed itself on the diplomatic stage.
Well, in 1936, a very important international conference took place in Buenos Aires. Mr. Roosevelt came here. The Secretary of State of the United States was Mr. Cordell Hull. And in Buenos Aires, in a confrontation of opinion of Mr. Hull and Mr. Saavedra Lamas, who was the foreign minister of Argentina, was born, all the system of consultation that is still in strength in America, that avoid confrontation through peaceful system, what we call the American inter-American system. Mr. Saavedra Lamas was devoted to that, and since then, all the Minister of Foreign Relations in Argentina and all the government fought in that direction. We were a member of the League of Nations, we were a member of the United Nations, and our delegation, as Mr. Hill knows perfectly well, fought in the direction of peace always. We have good relations with our neighbors, and we are, as you are, a nation open to all the countries in the world. Our population is come from all the corners of the world, I repeat. And then I believe that the peace, the internal peace and the international peace is really raison d'etre of the Argentine.
Well, you don't recognize Cuba, do you?
We recognize Cuba in 6 or 7 years ago.
Well, then for a while you didn't recognize Cuba.
Before?
Yeah. So there's an obvious historical example of a step short of war by which Argentina expressed its disapproval of Cuba.
Well,
Cuba.
I don't follow your idea quite well, Mr. Buckley.
Well, there are gradations by which countries express themselves in opposition to another country.
Yes.
They go to war. That's the ultimate sanction. They suspend diplomatic relations. They give less than favorable tariff considerations. They scold in presidential messages. They give a speech in the United Nations against the policies of that particular country. Now, America is always being called upon to fine-tune its relations towards other countries. Mr. Hill will be eloquent on this, I know, in just a moment. But I'm wondering whether Argentina doesn't also have a history of attempting to express through various inflections its approval or disapproval of the internal policies of other countries. And we just began by acknowledging that up until a few years ago, you had suspended your diplomatic relations with Cuba.
Well, as far as I remember, the relation was interrupted when the government in Cuba stated clearly that he was accepting the Marxist-Leninist system. And at that time, the countries of the inter-American system thought that it was incompatible with the principle accepted in the inter-American system. That's the reason because most of the nations of America broke their relationship with Cuba, with the exception of Mexico. And I am remembering that this decision was adopted in an inter-American conference in Punta del Este. And then the Argentine government, and I believe the American government also, following the decision of a collective decision. Little by little, by different reasons, the decision was this collective decision was put aside, and many of the nations of the hemisphere began to reestablish the relationship with Cuba.
Ambassador Hill, John Quincy Adams, when he was inaugurated, made the statement, the people of America are friends of liberty everywhere, but custodians only of their own. Do you agree with him?
Yes.
Now, do you think that
I think we violated his advice over the years, Mr. Buckley.
Oh, you mean through Wilsonianism, for instance?
Yes.
And are you totally out of sympathy with Wilsonianism in any form?
No.
In what forms do you approve of it?
Well, I think you're asking a theoretical question, and I might deviate somewhat from the original question that you asked Ambassador Roca. I believe that the time has come for the United States not to try to police the world. We have grave problems at home. Now, it's true that as a member of the power structure, we're called upon from time to time to assist and stopping conflicts. But the day has come where Great Britain no longer rules the seas. France is no longer the power that it used to be as far as the colonies were concerned. And we should be very busy at home and try to keep our meddling in foreign affairs down to the minimum. So I would revert back to what you said about Mr. Adams, and I think it still should be a part of our practical policy.
Well, now, do you consider that it is to meddle with another country's policies to make mention of another country's uncivilized practices? I'm not speaking about Argentina now. I don't want to make you nervous.
You won't make me nervous at all, Mr. Buckley, because I
question.
hope you will talk about Argentina.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's a lot to be learned
Sure.
during your visit here about this great country. I do not like the policeman's role. Now, I recognize that...
I wasn't about the policeman's role. I was talking about the moralist role.
Well, we have grave moral problems in the United States. And
Well,
I'd like to see our people pay attention to making us a better society than in trying to tell someone else in the Far East or in Europe or in the Middle East or in Africa how to run their affairs.
Well, both can be done simultaneously. As a matter of fact, most presidents who address the United States spend much more time criticizing practices in our country than they do in other countries. They urge us to be more tolerant of the races. They urge us to be better civil libertarians and so on and so forth. So it isn't as though our own citizens were spared. But I'm asking you whether you really think that there ought to be no moral discourse among the leaders of nations, or whether that moral discourse ought to be confined to its poets.
Well, I think the objectives of the Carter administration and the fervor that he's brought into his campaign speeches and into his inaugural address and the moral principles, that's fine. And it's very good for the United States to have our president of this character. And it's all right to be in international forums and discuss it on a very high level. But bringing about the implementation is something else. And then when you try to bring about the implementation is when the sanctions become involved. And there, I think the United States should be very, very careful. One, understand the problem before you legislate the sanctions. And I don't think, speaking of Argentina, that the problem is very well known in the United States. The terrible turmoil that this great country is passing through as a result of the influx of Marxism, Castro's influence in Argentina, Trotskyites that are here. They're having a terrible struggle in bringing their country back to the pinnacle it was some years ago. Primarily because of the infiltration of communists.
Intending no cynicism at all, in what sense is it a great country?
Argentina is the 8th largest country in the world with a population of 25 million people. Approximately 10 million are Italians. This is a world that is hungry. We hear about it constantly in the press. Yet Argentina is the breadbasket, one of the great breadbaskets in the world. If we had an international food bank so Argentina could get paid for its products, there'd be less hungry people in the world. This is one enormous contribution that Argentina can make. 6 feet of topsoil, where you can grow anything 12 months a year.
So you're talking about its size and its agricultural resources when you say a great country.
Right.
Excuse me, Ambassador Roca, you want to say something?
Yes, I was to underline some statement made by Mr. Hill. In the field of the principle, my country agree completely with the deep concern of the United States about the human rights. I am astonished on some occasion how similar both countries are in his egalitarianism, his republicanism, his opening to the world, and his respect for the human person. But I am afraid at that moment that some effect that come from, in what this phenomenon that in shorthand we can call the Vietnam and Watergate problems. The moral issues is coming back in the States. They are in your country. They are adapting the human rights question as a flag to become an arrogant nation in front of the world. And that coming back, this new high profile against the low profile of the Nixon doctrine and the previous statement of the government is reflected in the laws in the states of the last Congress. You know, the foreign aid law, the emergency aid law, the law of the, for instance, the Inter-American Bank, what we call the Hawkins Amendment, in which the United States is using their weapons, the economic weapons, its importance, to judge the internal situation of the countries. Then I see that in the general principle we agree completely. But in the appreciation of the particular circumstances, political circumstances of a country, we are not going to agree, because it's difficult for a country, Argentina or another country of the world, to accept that a Congress of the other country be the judge of their internal turmoil. I think that Argentina is, we are experimenting the same thing that Spain. We are making tremendous efforts to go to a plurilateral political society. In the middle of difficulties, very complicated, very cruel, we are suffering a lot of our internal turmoil. Then to be a judge for that circumstantial problem by the Congress of another nation, it's a question that could complicate the whole matter of the relationship between the countries. I'm sure.
I understand your point exactly, Mr. Ambassador, but I think it is probably based on your own intimate knowledge of the Argentinian situation. My own far from intimate knowledge of the Argentinian situation leads me at this juncture to the same conclusions that you reached, that it would be stupid for the United States to assert sanctions against Argentina. But satisfying myself thusly on the concrete point does not satisfy my theoretical appetite to ask whether the idea of sanctions ought never to be resorted to. Now, for instance, recently we protested the denial of civil rights in Czechoslovakia as in violation of Basket 3 of the Helsinki Agreement. Should we have done that or should we not have done that? How about it, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, I was very pleased that the attention was placed on the East European countries.
Well, then you do believe in sanctions?
I believe it should be discussed at the United Nations, and I believe it should be discussed by the powers, the powerful countries in the world, an exchange of ideas. You see, all the attention on human rights has been primarily on Chile, Uruguay, and Argentina. People forget about human rights in Cuba, and they had evidently forgotten about human rights in Czechoslovakia. And now where human rights have become an issue, it isn't up to me to determine whether it's right or wrong. It is already in the public view. And I'm saying that I'm pleased that they're focusing their attention on Czechoslovakia, and I hope they'll focus their attention on what's happening inside the Soviet Union, what's happening in China, what's happening in Cuba.
Well,
and then
focusing their attention is shorthand for what?
And then if they want to, in the United Nations, apply sanctions against countries that are in violation of human rights.
How can you do that?
Well, you can talk about it at the International Forum in New York, and you can pass the resolutions, and hopefully something will come out of it.
But I don't think you can't pass sanctions without the acquiescence of the Security Council,
Right.
in which there's always
The
an available veto. Yeah.
The veto, which is one of the unfortunate things about the way the United Nations is constructed, because the veto.
So you think there should be more sanctions?
No, I don't think there should be more sanctions. I think they should discuss it, and I think that the United Nations then should try, through their means, even facing the veto, to moralize the issue, which you raised a short time ago, and hopefully some of the countries will do something about it. It perhaps is wistful thinking.
Well, do you think that the
But
sanctions...
I don't think that the United States or France or Great Britain should be the leader in this area, because all they'll do is create enemies for their country.
Whereas this seems to me a council of despair.
It is.
If we ought not to take the lead in talking about human rights, or who's supposed to do so? Argentina? Mexico?
Well, you have another organization when you're talking about the Western Hemisphere, the Organization of American States. And Ambassador Roca has served there with distinction. Maybe he'd like to have a comment about whether your Organization of American States should take a position on human rights.
I will do, but first I want to go back to that question. I believe that the line, through the line, is very, very complicated. It's not an easy one.
That's why we're discussing it for a whole hour. Because it is
I hope
complicated.
you discuss something else, because there are many more important subjects.
And I believe that, but because it's too difficult, a law with the simplicity of a law, it's not an easy law to formulate, as the Congress of the United States is trying to do. I want to be fair. I believe that the deep sentiment of which is behind this tendency, this new current on the state, is an honest one, and I admire it, and I repeat that we, as a country, we are behind that idea, and maybe is in the natural constitution of the United States to be the leader, or the manifest destiny. They believe in that, and somebody must take this flag. But it's difficult to discriminate, to separate in the general principles and in the circumstantial situation. You spoke about sanctions. This is a matter of this. In what you have to distinguish. That is impossible to state a sanction upon a country of another side of the curtain. Only moral sanctions. But where the sanctions are possible, when the United States has good relations with a nation, when with the United States as a country is giving aid, then he can stop the aid.
Right.
As a foreign. Then, in the annual information that the Department of State must prepare to the Congress, and in which the qualification of the comportamiento, how do you say, the behavior of a country in the natural, what you call the human rights question, the qualification, if you are under the minimum credits, you are going to stop the aid to this country. Then the sanctions are going to be established upon the friendly nations, not against or at least the nation of the other sides of the socialist one. Then I admit in the sincerity of the theme, admitting that the good intention, I foresee clearly problems in the judgment of the behavior, political internal behavior of the nation, friendly nation of the state in that question.
Well, yeah, that they would be counterproductive. The imposition of sanctions is often counterproductive. Now, this is what the Soviet Union insisted, and Mr. Kissinger insisted as an argument against our Jackson Amendment. They said if we pass that, it's going to be interpreted as an attempt to interfere with internal practices. And under the circumstances, what will probably result is that fewer Jews will be allowed to leave the Soviet Union. And as a matter of fact, that's true. Question, ought the Jackson Amendment for that reason ought it not to have been passed? Ditto Rhodesia. Lord Hume said that he was very much against sanctions. The only sanctions really effectively imposed by the United Nations. But, said he, his government was not in power at the time that they were passed. And when his government came to power, he felt it necessary to stand by the rules. But let's get particular then for a moment, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Hill. You do not believe that there are any grounds for sanctions against Argentina based on what you see happening in Argentina. Am I correct?
No, you have completely misinterpreted what I was trying to tell you. Keep in mind, Mr. Buckley, that we carry out the instructions from the Department of State. If there's legislation passed by our Congress, and we're asked to inform the host government about this legislation, and we're expected to carry out our instructions from the Department of State. It doesn't make any difference how I personally feel about it, because I believe in following the instructions of the Secretary of State, and I believe that I have an obligation to implement the legislation in the United States. My own personal feelings are of no concern. However, I tried to make the point some time ago that I think that the Congress of the United States, and I've had some experience in dealing with Congress, some of the most pleasant years of my life were spent as clerk of the Banking Committee, and the 2 years that I worked for Mr. Dulles on congressional relations. If the Congress of the United States is going to pass legislation affecting a country in the Western Hemisphere, go to that country and look firsthand before you make your decision, because you can hardly determine what's going on in Argentina by reading the newspapers, because it doesn't tell any of the good things that's happening here. The great effort that Argentina made to maintain a constitutional government. It was a tremendous story. Went on for over a year, yet nothing was said in the papers about it. We just had the body count of the terrorists that were killed. When I returned to the United States, people, the first question they asked me, how many people were killed in Argentina the day before you left? And it's rather annoying. Now, the Congress, in their wisdom, and they do travel a lot, if a group of congressmen would come down here to Argentina and talk with the leaders, and talk with the people, talk with the critics of the government, and then go back and write their legislation, we would have better legislation in the field of human rights.
Well, now, I'm trying to see how I misinterpreted you.
Well, I think that you feel that I feel that Argentina is being picked upon. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think it is being picked upon.
Right. And you feel, and that I'm perhaps more in sympathy with what they're trying to accomplish here than what we're trying to accomplish in Argentina? Did I misinterpret your?
No, but we're trying to
because your innuendos come awfully fast.
As I understand it, you're interested in human rights. You're interested in human rights. I'm interested in human rights. The Congress is interested in human rights, and we think that General Videla is interested in human rights, right?
What caused the human rights problem, Mr. Buckley, in your opinion, in Argentina?
Well, what caused the human rights problem is a series of reports by people who are allegedly innocent, who have disappeared. Essentially that.
No,
and the failure of the government to release the names of those who have disappeared.
No, that's not correct, in my opinion. The human rights problem was caused by the terrorists. They were killing innocent people. The first week I was in Argentina, I left the residence one morning at 9:15, and within 3 blocks, a body was thrown in front of our automobile. Now, the object, of course, was to have us run over the body and then blame the United States ambassador and his chauffeur for this incident. I sent to Washington in November 10 pages of terrorist activities since I came to Argentina. 10 pages. Some of them were frightening. The United States government is spending $1 million to maintain an embassy in Argentina. The reason they have to spend that $1 million is because of the terrorists. And who are the terrorists? They're a wild assortment of, as I've said before, Maoists, Marxists, Leninists, that would like to overthrow this government.
Hopefully none of them here.
Well, I doubt if there are any in the studio because I'm pretty well covered in Argentina. But this is the reason that human rights arise, is because the terrorists have brought about the problem. And then as we try to attack the problem of human rights, and some people consider interference in the internal affairs of another country, we get lost at the end of the spectrum, not at the beginning where it started.
Well, but Mr. Hill, it's not entirely that simple. I mean,
Well, nothing in life is simple,
no,
but this,
the
I'm trying to
question
reduce
is,
it to...
it's like the people who said that Castro is justified in virtue of the policies of Batista. The answer is Castro was not justified. And the question in Argentina, as I understand it, is, are the activities of the AAA, for instance, justified by the activities of the Montoneros? And I'm not going to sit in judgment in answer to that question, but I will insist that it is a legitimate question, so that we all would agree that anti-terrorist activity is justified by terrorist activity, but certain kinds of anti-terrorist activity might not be justified. Is that right?
Mr. Buckley, it's difficult to give a clear explanation of the things. We are not in a civil war in the classical terms of the Civil War. This is not a police situation controlling small groups of terrorism. It's a new thing. It's a new activity, not qualified, not schematized by the literature and by the rules. We are fighting not only the government, all the country, against this form of attack that we are suffering, who is really destroying some basic elements of our life. Perhaps there is no country in the world who believes more in the friendship, the internal, the opening of the life, the hospitality of the Argentina. We really make the friendship a basic element of our daily life. And these people are using this friendship to introduce in the family of the members of the government. All the bombs are not put by people disguised as boy, desk, mandaderos, messengers. No, they are disguised as friends of the family, friends of the institution. No, then we are. It's difficult to handle all this question with the very normal. We are dealing, trying, making new, and we are absolutely sure. If you speak with Mr. Fidel, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, you be sure, as are we sure, that we are winning space and that we will arrive very soon to absolutely a normal situation. We don't have the sentiment of a guilty nation in that area. We are very sure that we are doing. Then we wait only for respect, as the public in the world is having to Spain, respect for the effort that the government in Spain is doing to arrive to a new democracy. We wait the same thing, not sanction, only comprehension and confidence. And we are entitled to ask for that. That is our point of view.
And do you want to comment on that?
No, I have no further comment.
Well, the whole question of sanctions leads us in what direction would you like to go? Because you mentioned something that was on your mind a little while ago.
Mr. Buckley, I think you have to stop and analyze, is Argentina important to the United States? And if it is, then I think we have to have a greater understanding of what they're passing through as they're trying to return their country to normalcy. Now, keep in mind,
we should
Mr.
have a
Buckley,
great understanding even if Argentina weren't important, shouldn't we?
well,
as a matter of justice.
Well, as a matter of justice, that's a fine principle. Yes, I would agree with you on that. But I'm talking about the practical things of life. We have 1,500,000,000 in investments in Argentina, in certain areas in our country today. To talk about multinational corporations, it's unpopular. We have an enormous investment here. The new government under the junta, with President Videla, Admiral Massera, and General Agosti, and their very fine economic minister, Martinez Dios, they welcome foreign investors to Argentina. They want our technicians. And those relations have changed considerably. I think you would agree with me, Ambassador Roca, in the last 10 or 15 years, because there was a time in Argentina when the British and Americans were not particularly wanted, although they were here. Now, that investment in Argentina is important to the United States. I believe in the free enterprise system, and profits are generated in Argentina, which we benefit by in the United States. Your family has had a long association in the oil business in foreign countries. You know the importance of oil in Venezuela to your own family. Now, we have to take that into consideration. If we're going to have policies in our country that causes us to lose that opportunity to prosper in another land, I think we're making a mistake. Now, another thing about Argentina that's very important, it's not perhaps too well understood in our country, is Argentina's foreign service is considered one of the best of the Latin American countries, the Western Hemisphere. They've made enormous contributions at the Organization of American States and at the United Nations. And I think to have an understanding with Argentina, so they understand us, we understand them, and we have, when they think it's justified, their support in these international forums is very important. Would you care to comment about that, Ambassador Roca, because you've lived the life at the Organization of American States?
No, I believe
you know
that
the role of Argentina.
The Organization of American States has resorts, has institution to deal with that problem, no? With the participation of all the nations involved. And I believe that this organization could come to the life again, because in the last 10 years, with the low-profile attitude of the states, that kind of institution were in the shadow. I believe that this new policy will reactivate, and that is the natural field to express the concern of the different government for that kind of problem. That we experimented similar situation in the past, and for that reason we created this system, inter-American system.
Well, let's speak about Argentina directly for a moment. When I was a delegate to the 28th Assembly of the United Nations in 1973, Argentina was in the lowest 5 percentile of frequency of votes with the United States on crucial issues. During the Second World War, Argentina was conspicuous in this hemisphere for its failure to cooperate with the United States on the World War. Now, this is not a piece of retroactive vindictiveness that I mention this, but to the extent that we want to harmonize our foreign policy with Argentina on the assumption of past cooperation, the record is pretty sketchy, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is sketchy. As I pointed out, they don't always agree with us. Quite frequently they do not, but they express themselves. And maybe we've had poor salesmen, Mr. Buckley, dealing with Argentina. Maybe we've had men over the years that really haven't understood this country, what their objectives are. But I want to make one point very clear, so we not come out of this program with any impression that I'm becoming an Argentine citizen in the near future. I am not. I'm here trying to represent the United States, and I don't believe in being Mexicanized, and I don't believe in being turned into a proponent of Spain just because I enjoyed the country. What I'm trying to present to you today in the brief period that we're together is there's two sides of the story. There's two sides of the coin, and we're only getting one side of the coin in the United States. And that's why your visit here is very important, because you're respected in this country and you're well known in international circles. And the opinions that you convey in the United States about your impressions of Argentina are a lot more important than Ambassador Roca and myself. So anything that you ask us today about Argentina, we're prepared to answer them. But as far as theoretical questions are concerned, they're very interesting, but it would take a lot more time than I believe your program allows. So could we be a little bit more specific?
Okay. Why is it that the Argentina story is so widely unknown in the United States, in your opinion?
In my opinion, Mr. Buckley, I think one of the problems the Argentine government has is their lack of understanding of public relations. We've talked about this several times with Argentine friends. They've recently retained a well-known firm in New York to represent them, but it's a long process. And this has been an area that has not been understood, that for their country to receive loans, receive considerations in military supplies and so forth, they've got to have an excellent embassy, which they have, but they've also got to tell the story of Argentina to the American people. I don't think there's anything more important than the efforts made by India, for instance, to acquaint the United States with their problems by having India House in New York City, having exhibits in San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, Dallas, etc. Argentina is one of the great countries of the world, the 8th largest. We've covered one of the reasons why. The availability of food has got to do the same thing. And if the United States has an opportunity to know more about them by their efforts in the United States, then more tourists will come to Argentina, and that'll be good also in bringing about a better understanding between the two countries.
What are you going to do, or what public relations firm is going to say what to the United States to make understandable the enthusiasm with which the people of Argentina greeted Perón? How do we handle problems of that sort?
Very good question. Ambassador Roca, that was during your period.
Mr. Mr. Buckley, they, in the past, when both nations began to born or to be a nation, you are the first new nation, and we are the second new nation. We follow the. We were the first, second new Spanish new nation in America. And a sort of a competition grew between the two, the United States and Argentina. At the beginning of the century, Argentina was a very, really potential, potential at international level. The first big battleship that United States sold in its history was sold to Argentina when we were near to the war with Chile. After that, different paths were taken by the nation, and we are naturally in a different level of importance in the world. But for that origin came this antagonism that you pointed recently. Remember our position in the two wars, and I believe that there's still some resort that functioned when our country came to the international arena in the States. I have the impression when I lived in North America, and when I read here your newspaper, that always something remained about this.
Hostility?
When the people all look at us with full of suspicion, as Mr. Hill told, our history arrived there only from the wrongs, not the wrongs, and the bad side, no? And you can look at, I repeat the example because it's a good one, you can look at Spain making effort to go towards acceptable target. And you can look at our situation only as a police matter, no? And I believe that the reason maybe is in that all and completely overcome antagonism between the two nations, no? And this, and in some occasion in Washington, I saw that something was still alive. No?
And you trace that to the Second World War, or you trace it to Perón?
Second World War.
Would you, Ambassador Hill, would you think that still lingers as a enduring resentment? Because that's not my impression that it does.
People forget rather quickly.
Yeah, and I think they forgot that. But I don't think they've forgotten Perón.
No.
Because Perón keeps being reelected. But
No longer.
no longer.
But perhaps, why do you link Perón with the antagonism with the United States?
Well, because Perón unquestionably had the backing of the overwhelming majority of the Argentinian people. And since he was a demagogue and did a lot to hurt your country, I think everybody concedes this, don't they? A certain disrespect for the workings of Argentinian democracy resulted. Jorge Luis Borges has, for instance, said that it is very difficult to speak about Argentinian democracy with much respect after the experience of Perón. So I think undoubtedly that has caused a certain amount of disrespect. But I don't think it's strategically. I don't think there are people in America who want to avenge themselves on Argentina. That's why I'm interested in Ambassador Hill's probe as to why there is less understanding than there ought to be of the problems that your country is having in getting rid of Perón and of the terrorists who, after all, were born as a part of the Peronist movement. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Do you think there's an ideological hostility to understanding Argentina
No,
in America?
I don't think so.
Then why these difficulties?
Well, the
In getting the story
difficulties
across.
Ambassador Roca has tried to cover. At the present time, Mr. Buckley, the only difficulty we're having in the United States is the fact that all we read about Argentina is the killing of people. And that concerns our citizens, and rightly so. But they are not in a position to go behind the action and to find out why this is taking place. And that's why I said to you that it is very important that you come to Argentina and get your impressions. It's very important that many newsmen come here and look at Argentina.
It's
important for the congressman to come.
You told me that when you first came here, it was in the company of 12 congressmen. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not 14.
14 congressmen. Now, why have so few congressmen visited Argentina in the last few years?
Well, the congressmen have not been traveling a great deal in Latin America in recent years, and I think one of the reasons, Mr. Buckley, was they travel where they think important events are taking place, and where Dr. Kissinger was traveling for the past 8 years. And it took Dr. Kissinger, as you know, a long time to get down in this part of the world, this referred to as the Southern Cone. And of course, when he did come to Latin America, he did not visit Argentina.
For what reason?
Well, I think there were many reasons, because Dr. Kissinger's schedule was such that he could only be in Argentina, say, on the 10th and 11th of June. And that was right during the middle of the conference in Santiago. And it was highly unlikely that the Argentine government would have their foreign minister, the very able foreign minister, Guzzetti, return from the conference to welcome Kissinger here in BA. And so the Argentines said, if you can come after the conference is over or before the conference, you'll be welcome. And Dr. Kissinger was unable to work it into his schedule. But as a result, there hasn't been a great flow of congressmen here. Kissinger did not visit Argentina.
Has Congressman Fraser been here?
No, but the Argentine government, President Videla, told me just before Christmas he would welcome a visit by Congressman Fraser.
Have you extended it, the invitation?
We have told Congressman Fraser through the State Department that he would be most welcome in Argentina, and so would the representative. It's quite critical of the Southern Cone, Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile, Mr. Koch from New York. He has been told that he'd be welcome in Argentina.
Has he replied?
No, not to my knowledge.
Want me to goose him?
I think it would be very helpful if you, where you know the senators and congressmen so well, Mr. Buckley, that if you believe that you are traveling in a civilized part of the world, in a very interesting part of the world, in a very important part of the world, that you use your enormous influence to have them start once again to travel in this area, because important events are taking place in Chile, important events are taking place in Peru, in Brazil, Uruguay, Bolivia, Paraguay. Much more attention is taken of the northern cone, Venezuela, because of its enormous influence, because of oil, Colombia, Ecuador. But encourage your friends to come on down here. They'll receive a warm welcome by the Argentine officials and by the Americans that earn their livelihood in Buenos Aires and in Argentina.
Is it your impression that the recent trip by representatives of Amnesty International will result in a broader understanding of what's going on here?
No. Father Drinan is someone that I've known. He's from Newton, Massachusetts, and he visited me the day before I left to return to the United States on consultation, and we had a generous 3/4 of an hour together. His visit was welcomed by our embassy. Father Drinan was given every cooperation by the Argentine government. He is a congressman. He serves on a very important committee. He was here with other members of Amnesty International, and we have not seen their report, but if it's consistent with past reports, it'll probably condemn Argentina's human rights, violation of human rights. It's interesting to note that when Congressman Drinan, Padre Drinan, returned to Washington after spending 10 days here, he spoke at Georgetown University and gave a very balanced viewpoint of what was happening in Argentina. Those of us that were fortunate to either hear him personally or read his memorandum were pleased. However, recently he did speak on the floor of the House of Representatives and was very critical of Argentina, which seemed quite a shift from what he'd said over at Georgetown University. I expect to be in Washington later on in February, and I'm planning to go by and call on Congressman Drinan, and also I plan to go by and see Congressman Frazier, who I had the pleasure of meeting when I served as Assistant Secretary of Defense. And if they're interested in hearing my point of view based upon going on 4 years of experience here, I'll be very happy to chat with them. If they hold hearings again, Mr. Buckley, whether I'm in government service or out, I shall request to be heard. Because once again, I think the man that's been in the field is perhaps in a position to have some knowledge and a balanced outlook of what's going on in the Southern Cone. And maybe some of my experiences would be of interest to the committee. So I hope Mr. Frazier will accept me as a witness if he opens up the hearings.
And Mr. Ambassador Roca, from your point of view, what is it that the United States might conceivably do that would be most damaging to you? Is it pride that is involved primarily, or is it a matter of economic, military aid, or what?
Maybe the three together, no? Pride. Second, the States, the United States is really the world finance center, and we are connected with them. We receive support from the international institutions, for the private institutions, when this new government came in position through the effort made by Martinez Dios, our Minister of Economic. It's not well known the tremendous effort that the Argentine government was obliged to perform in order to re-establish the relation with the Occidental world in the financial and economic field. And in the third field that you mentioned, the weapons and armaments deals through the system of aid that the United States has established in that area.
What are they necessary for? What do you use your arms for primarily? Since you've had such a peaceful history.
Well, it's it's a very clever question of you, but in your activities, but every nation in the world needs an army. There is no question at all. And if we avoided the war, we are absolutely sure that we can avoid in the future. But to be a country without army, it's a temptation to the war, not a way to avoid it. then it's very clear that we need an army, and we are very proud of it. Second, we were very near to a real war. The Angola president could be a case performed in Argentina in Tucumán. The activities of our guerrilla looked for a territory to establish. Then if they succeed in that, maybe the first attempt of Castro could be in our country, not in Angola. Mm-hmm. And then we cannot think that we are free of war in the world. And meanwhile, the United States has rejected the idea of the Pax Americana. That was the idea of in the 60s. What could happen if a nation of Africa, for instance, of Asia, decided to invade our country or neighbor country? Then to think in a country without army, it's a very clever question of view, but it's not a practical one in the daily aspects of our life. I'm afraid, Mr. Buckley, and I agree completely with Ambassador Hill that you could be an important man this year, that this year could be critical for the relation between the two countries. And because the Congress of your country was in the opposition in the last 2 years with regard to the administration. Now that the Congress and the administration are in the hands of the same party, and according to the law, not a juridical law, but a political law, stated in the analysis of the president by the Brookings Institution that I read a few weeks ago, in the first year of the new president is in which the risk of a very unconsulted action could take place. And that's my worry is that your president would
take a wrong turn prematurely.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Roca. Thank you, Ambassador Hill. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley, for coming.
For a printed, bound transcript of this program, send $1 to Firing Line, Post Office Box 5966, Columbia, South Carolina, 29250. That's Firing Line, Post Office Box 5966, Columbia, South Carolina, 29250. This program was produced by SICA, which is solely responsible for its content, and was funded in part by public television stations.